Alright, so we're going to attempt to make a picnic table. I have really no plans, but we're going to try to give this as step by step. I've got, I know the top is going to be 2x6s, and I have some regular 2x6s here, so we're going to go ahead and take those. I'm going to try to give you the dimensions and everything. You can say they're a little warped up, but I got a little twist to them here, a little there. These are 10-foot 2x6s. We needed 5 of them to make the tabletop, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the best 6 foot out of each of these, and we'll go ahead and cut that to start out with, because our table's going to be 6 foot long, and we're going to have 2 benches to go with that, or detached benches, so it's going to be a little different. Let's see how we do with that. So we'll set up to cut these at 6 foot length. Okay, for the 6 foot dimension, we're going to go ahead and use the chop saw on the workbench. We're going to go ahead and line that up and set that down. We'll put a stop here so that they all maintain their 6 foot dimension. So we're going to set this up, and as I do this on my own, it's a little bit more challenging to really get everything set up, but we'll go through it. So 6 foot from the blade is going to be there, and we build a stop at this end. We'll put a block of wood here, and we'll clamp that down to make us a stop. Okay, give me a clamp. Okay, so what we've got is the little block of wood, and it's just simply clamped to it. And at the other end, if we look at the tape, we see that I'm right at 6 foot where the saw will come down at, and that'll do us fine there. So we'll cut one end of this off as we go through here and kind of pick and choose the proper end of it. So we'll start up our vacuum system so that we can collect some of that dust. We'll take measure out to the side, and we'll go ahead and collect our 5 boards. So we'll start back up. We're all set up. We've got the planer and the sander going. We're going to go ahead and run the board through here and sand it down and see how she looks after doing that. Okay, we've got them cut, and we're lying out, and we're going to put boards underneath this to hold it up. So we got to figure out exactly what we've got to do with that. So we want about 1/4 of an inch in between each of the boards. This is a little bit close up, but let's see if we can get this back a little bit further to show what we have got to do. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we've got these laid out. We want about 1/4 of an inch between each one of them. So we're going to go ahead and measure that at 5.5 inches each, and about 1/4 of an inch in between each one. So we're going to go, we're at about 27.25. So we're going to have 27.25 would be 28.25. So about 2 foot 4.25, and then we'll space those out. So we're going to cut a board 2x4 to go under there to hold those together. 2 foot 4.25 out of a 2x4, and this is going to give us just a little bit of an angle. So you'll see what that looks like when we're done. I'm going to put about well, my saw, I think I've set it up, and it's got actually a little notch in here for about 31 degrees, something like that. 31 degrees I think would be a good angle. So we're going to go ahead and cut these long point to long point at that dimension. So it'll be from this point with the angle coming across, and down here we'll measure this off, and we'll cut this one, and we need 3 of those, one for each end and one for in the middle. So we'll go ahead and cut those and see how that looks. Okay, so we're going to set this approximately 4 inches in. I'm going to smooth up the edge of this right to the edge of that, and then we simply take my countersink and pre-drill this hole, set it in a little bit, and then we'll take some screws, and I'm using some 2.5 inch screws. Should be plenty enough to hold that down, and I'm going to do that 1 screw in each one, and then we'll square it up to make sure that everything is square, and then we'll set the center one. So the next one would be this end, 4 inches in. Now, alright, 4 inches in. I'll pre-drill this one also. And then we'll put a screw in it. This on the other 2 sides also. So we'll get that done on this side, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, I've got 4 screws placed, 1 in each corner, basically. And at that point, it's 4 inches in from the edge. We've set the other 2 up, and now we need to square it before we put any other screws in there, because otherwise we're going to have a out of square. So I'm just going to simply take my framing square and this out of the way a little bit. And you can see we can put this on here, and it's off by a bunch. We can go until we get that square, and then we know we're in good shape, and we can go ahead and screw this one down the rest of the way, and this will hold it into square shape. And that, we'll double check just to make sure. Yes, that's good and square. So we'll go ahead and finish screwing those down, and then we'll put the other boards in the middle in a minute. Okay, I run into a little bit of an issue here. The table, as I started putting it down, had a little bit of a warp to it. So I went ahead and clamped it down to make sure it stays flat as I put it together. And then we're going to go ahead and set the center board. I've got the other ones. I screwed 2 screws into each one of the boards, countersunk, on both ends. So they're secured to the one underneath it. And now we're setting the center block. You will need to have in there, and that total dimension ended up being 60 inches from thereabouts, from there to the inside of that. The inside of that was approximately 60 inches. So when we ended up, I centered this up already, so we're about 30.5 inches to the center of that. It's just, that's a good measurement. I think we need to have pretty stable if we want to use the other pieces. So what we're going to do is go ahead and attach this end here, and then on the other side we'll measure that one and keep this one from moving. So when we'll attach those with 2 screws each all the way across there. Okay, so I set up, and I've got, for our bench seats, set up the same jig as I did for the top. We've cut these 4 boards into 6-foot lengths. And some of these boards I have are really twisted and warped, a little worse than I was hoping they would be. So I've actually had to go through a little bit extra, and I'm trying to get some of the warp back out of this one. Like I said, I clamped it down. I'm putting a little twist the other direction, see if we can get it to go back. But because they are kind of twisted up, I need 2x4s to do the other part. And I think these, if I cut them down, I can get the sections out of it, because as twisted as they are, they're not going to work well as 2x6s. So the next thing I want to do is just set it up. I'm going to run it through the table saw and cut them to make them a 2x4 width, and that'll be used for our legs on both the seats and the table itself. So we're going to go ahead and start cutting some of these up. Okay, I've got my 2x4s cut, and they're ready to go. I'm going to make legs out of them. I'm going to put them in a cross pattern similar to this. So we got to kind of figure out how to do this to make them work. And I believe most tables are someplace, well, let's just see. We're going to take a measurement here of a desk, and it would say that it's approximately, I don't know, 2'6" tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set this up and see if I can go through this to kind of show this. So we'll take the top of this, so our table would be 2'6" to the top. So we're going to pretend that that's it. And let me get a pencil. And we'll make our mark at 2'6", but I'm going to subtract 1.5 inches for the 2x4 on top of that. So 2'6" would be 2'4½". So that would be the bottom, or what we would hope to be the bottom of. So we'll take a square and just mark that. We know that that's going to be, from the front of this to this, is the height of the table. And so then we're going to want to run these legs crosswise from here to there. So the width of our table, we decided, was 2'4". So I need to have this the same width as our table, I believe. So let's see how far we need to actually separate the legs. So we had, like I say, the 4 of them there. So 2'4". So I need to go to that location. We need to continue that line a little bit further here. Make sure we're right. Off of my bench. 2'4" was, yes, right here. So that means that this leg has to go from this point here to this point here. And this leg will go from 2'4". 2'4" here, so I guess I need to do that too, don't I? So 2'4". It's right there. So 2'4" from that corner to there. And this one will be 2'4" from here to that other side. So that should give us the dimensions of our legs. So then all we have to do is mark this off, and that'll determine our angle on both the top and the bottom. So we'll go ahead and mark that. Simply setting up a straight edge. Get a straight edge set up. So we can mark it. Okay. That's pretty darn close to what we want. That'll do it right about there. So and that will be our angle. Now we have something to go on. We can cut that one, and we could also mark this other end, because it will be the same. Something to go by. to be the full length of our leg. And we'll need 4 of them this length, because all they'll do is swap back and forth, and we'll groove this out so that they slide together and we'll have a half lap joint on them. So we'll go ahead and take this to the saw and cut it length and make sure it looks right. To set our saw up, we do need to figure out this angle to make it easier to set our miter saw up. So we've got our line that we've drawn in there. We take our combination square and we can set that up, and we pivot it at this point. And I'm going to try to do this so that you can actually see what I'm doing. Let's see if I can get it somewhat. If we set this right on the edge and we rotate this to it, using this as our pivot, and line our line up perfectly, we can see, if we read across here, this outside edge, that's approximately a 40-degree angle. So if we have that as 40 degrees, now we can take our miter saw here and we can set that at 40 degrees. And that should be pretty darn good. So we'll make our cuts at 40 degrees, see how that looks. Go ahead and cut those out. Now, this will be the same angle. And that should be able to take this over and set it on our little spot here. And it should make it line up pretty close there. In that corner to this corner. And I think that's going to work pretty darn good. It lands there, and it lands right at that corner. So we're good. We'll go ahead and cut 4 of those to that length. Okay, the next step we need to do is to put the bench together. So we're going to have 2 of them side by side as I've set up here, and we'll need to put the bracing on this the same way we did with the top of the table. So we're going to put a brace on here. We're going to go 1/4 inch gap in there or so. So we're going to need to be approximately 11 inches. I think we'll set it up at 11 inches. And we'll have 3 braces across here. And then we'll build the legs off of that one. So we'll just cut some small blocks to put underneath that. I might use the ones I had left over from the 2x6s on there. Would probably be sufficient. So we'll try that. Okay, so I've got the boards cut, 11 inches long, point to point. Fits right on that. We're doing the same thing I did with the top. I'm going to do 3 boards. I think I'm going to do the same setup. I'm going to set them in 4 inches. We'll see how that works. We'll screw this. This should not be too awful difficult to get square. We can just run a small square off of this. So we'll go ahead and drill those 4 inches. Sure enough, 4 inches. Put a screw or 2 in this one. Okay, so now we need to build the rest of the legs for the stool, and for that I always use other items that are around the house to kind of figure out what I want. So the height of those legs, let's see, it's going to be normal seat. Looks like it's about 1 foot 6 inches, something like that. So I think that's what we'll work off of, is 1 foot 6 inches. And here again, I'm going to do the same as I did with the table itself. And we're going to make 1 foot 6 inches and set the wood up in that crisscross pattern once again. And we'll lay out our square to get that done. So we'll measure off, like I say, 1 foot 6 inches to the top. We're going to minus the 1.5 inches off of that because of the thickness of the boards that are sitting on top. So we really need to go 1 foot 6 will take us back down to, let's just make it 16 inches for easy calculating. Close enough. So we'll square that off. 11 inches or so, I think, wide. So we'll drop this out. Our benches. 11 inches. So we square that off at 11. And that will give us our pattern if we need it. And basically, we're going to be able to go from long point to long point. We could just measure that and say that our legs are going to be, being we know the angles and all, 19.5. We can go through that again. So 19.5. If we wanted to set that up, we could put it on our marks right where we want them. This one inside, this one on the other side, and then we can draw our line across that to give us our angle again. Calculate that angle and be able to cut it on that one. And so we're going to need two sets of that, four pieces. So we'll set those up and do it the same way we did the other legs. Okay, we've got all the legs parts cut, and so now we're going to have to establish the thing. We're going to do a half lap on these. So basically we're going to have these set up so that they sit on the ground like this, and we're going to dado out half of each one of these so that they slide together and make a complete joint. And they're going to have to fit here within the confines of the board. So that's going to be about 11 inches. So we're just going to set them in place right where they're going to go. And we'll just simply draw a pencil mark on there to show the angle that we're going to need. So it should be pretty close right there. And then we'll set up a jig. It's good and tight. We draw that, that, So we've got our pencil marks exactly where they want to go. So now we can do that and use those as patterns to dado out. So we'll go ahead and set up to dado those out. We'll set our table saw up with a dado blade to make this a little bit easier. We'll run it through there and just groove all that out. Set our heights correct. We should have no problems. So we'll show that after I get it set up. Okay, I've got my dado set up on the saw. I cut me a new plate to put in there. Those are pretty easy to do. So if I want to do a project, I like to cut a new plate, have some paneling. That way I've always got the zero clearance on it. I know exactly what my blade's going to cut. You simply make them and bring your blade up. There's videos out there, I think, to show how to do that. Maybe one day I'll do one myself. So what I'm going to do is just check for height to make sure I'm getting exactly halfway, and I like to kind of play around with that. So I've got me some sample scrap pieces here. I'm just going to run those through it a couple times and make sure that I'm real close on my 2 dimensions, and we'll see how it goes from there. Let's see if we can capture some of it. We'll go ahead and set up. that's got those evened out. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and lay out for cutting these out. And let's see how we can make those work. Okay, so I'm going to have several of these to set up for. I did it just because I need to have a nice even guide on that. I've set my fence up. I've made my marks on my board here. You can see those real well. So that's where I need it cut out at. Bring that up and I make sure that it's hitting right where it needs to on my blade. And then after I do that, I bring it back here and I've marked on my little stop here that's made for doing this. You can clean that off. And the other side of my blade has also been marked so that I know exactly where it's going to cut when I bring this thing forward. So we can run this one through, and as long as I keep it against that fence on this one, we'll be good. We need 4 of them, I know, on this exact arrangement. So we're going to go ahead and cut this one out on the one edge 4 times and show you how, then we'll set it back up and do it again. So 1, 2. All right, so I just simply got them cut out, finished them up, and we've kind of set them together. So they all are just setting together. We'll glue and screw those up. That's all 4 of them for the seat. Well, I've got the dado set up. I'm going to go ahead and do the basic same format and work out a way to get the tabletop angles grooved in. So we'll work on that one next. Okay, so we'll just show the progress. Okay, we've got the legs now setting in place, how they're going to look on the legs on the table. And we've also got them setting on the table here. And they're just kind of held in place with a clamp right now. So what we'll do is we're going to get these joints. We'll take this back apart here. We'll add glue to both surfaces and then put a couple screws in there to just kind of hold it together. And we'll do that to both of those, and we'll do that to those, and then we'll simply run some screws in here to hold them to the brace. And then the only other thing we're going to have to do is we'll calculate this angle after we get all this into position down to here, and we'll brace it off of this and stagger this somewhat. So we'll go ahead and go through the gluing and screw that together and get it ready to go until we get ready to figure the next step. Okay, so for my next, we need to build this. I've got my scrap piece of 2x here, and let's see if we can set this so that we can see what I'm doing a little bit. We're going to simply take this. It already has an angle on it. It ought to be one of the angles, pretty close. So we're going to set it here, and let's see how close it is. Looks like it's pretty darn good, so that ought to work. So I can just mark these there and there. We'll cut that same angle. We should be good. Let me cut it, see if it works, and then we'll match it on the other side. Okay, I cut that. It looks like it works pretty well, and so I went ahead and cut the other one to match. And so now we'll just simply screw them in there, and we're going to offset these by just a little bit here so that we can run our screws in from this side and this side straight. So that'll put that, and we'll simply run a couple of screws in on the end down here, and that should hold everything together. We'll flip the table over and should be ready to go. Okay, we've got them together. We've cut and finished it off. Looks pretty good. The only problem we've got is the boards are a little warped, so they have a certain amount of the legs aren't touching the ground right. But I think we'll put some weight on it and force it to go where we want it to go, and it'll make it work all right. So that's what it takes to build a picnic table. That'll work. It'll serve its purpose, I believe. So we'll go with it. All right, so we run into a little bit of issue. I thought the table was going to lay down flat. We never did get it to do that. So what I had to do is come back in and do a little bit of a modification. So as you can see, because it didn't do that, I took the 2x6s and I cut them in half to take some of that extra warpage out of them, which I left the outside ones there that were fairly straight. That kind of helped out some of it, and actually I kind of like the looks of it. It kind of gives it a little bit more detail. Still did not completely lay down, so in order to get it to do that, I had to do a little bit of engineering underneath the underside of this. I'm going to try to show it and understand how it actually works. So, because of the offset, I knew I had to pull one end down and the other one not. So I put a block under here and screwed it to the bracing. And then it was just enough room to put the 2x4 under there. And then you come back and you put some sort of a brace into here, which pulls the other end of that 2x4 down. And I needed to pull that corner down. So with this brace being under here, then I could go ahead and run a screw up into the top of the table. And as I drove that up to it, it brought that corner of the table down. And I adjusted the wedge to a point where that leg then would sit flat on the floor. So I got that half of the table brought down, and then I had to do the same thing on the other side and move my wedges and add the screws and another brace over there. So I did that. Now, maybe one day that could actually be removed after the table settles out, but if it ever does get more warpage to it, of course, we can come in here and adjust those wedges and draw it on down. Nobody sees it up underneath there anyway, so it's not really hurting anything. But it's got the table sitting flat, so if you end up using as warped boards as what I ended up using, not really recommended, but what do you say? When the lumberyard sends you that, that's what you work with, and I made the best I could out of it. I couldn't send the wood back, so I had to use it for something. Picnic table will work. Braces aren't going to hurt anything. And I've got everything sitting level now, so it'll work just fine. I think that'll conclude this one. Any comments, please add them to it. And I apologize for some of the sound quality. I've got to figure out a way to get this microphone to follow me around the shop as I'm working so that I can actually talk as I'm doing things a little bit better. But we'll work on that. Thanks again for watching.